Good afternoon, and welcome to my first Twitter Town Hall. I want to thank all of you who submitted questions over the last week through Twitter and Facebook and email, and also all of you who are turning in live to our web stream. Not only am I looking forward to answering as many questions as possible over the next half hour, but I'm excited about utilizing social media and new technology in order to keep in touch with New Jerseyans while I'm here working in Washington. And I wanted my first Twitter town hall to focus on oil and gas prices and our energy policy, because I know, as I travel the state, families are really feeling the pain at the pump. And there's a lot of discussion about how we make our country less dependent on foreign oil and more energy independent. As a matter of fact, right now, the United States Senate is debating my bill to end taxpayer subsidies for the big five oil companies and to use that savings to invest in clean energy and also to reduce the deficit. So we've got a lot to talk about. And one final note before we start. For the purposes of today's town hall, I obviously, since I'm going to be answering directly to the camera, won't be able to live tweet my answers to your questions. So instead, my new media director, Megan, is going to be live tweeting my answers for me. So let's get started.
Okay, sir, just a couple of housekeeping items. As the senator said, over the last week, folks have sent in questions through Twitter, Facebook, and email. In order to keep with the spirit of Twitter, we've gone ahead and shortened those questions that came in that were over 140 characters. And since we wanted to get in as many questions as possible in a half an hour, we have tried to choose questions that represent the range of topics that people wrote in about. All right, so let's go to our first question. Senator, this question comes in from Buck Cable 9. When is Congress going to act on oil speculation? Banks and Wall Street are making huge profits by interfering with normal market forces.
Well, Tricia, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission is formulating rules right now on things like something we call position limits to prevent oil speculators from excessive speculations, bets that drive up prices. That's something we have already passed, but a lot of us, we passed that through the Dodd-Frank legislation, giving the Commodity Futures Trading Commission the power to do this. But many of us are getting impatient with the CFTC, and we're prepared to focus on continuing legislation to move their process a lot faster.
Okay, let's see what we have. Next is a question from Mike, which says, when will we finally start drilling for our own energy on our own federal lands?
Well, you know, production was slightly down last year, but the reality is that it is far higher than the end of the Bush years. And the reality is that what we have is the president has opened up large amounts of federal land and waters beyond what we previously had. He has even opened up parts of the Gulf, parts of the Arctic. So the one thing that I find it interesting is that there are millions of acres of federal land and water that have already been leased out. And in fact, those who have been given the leases are not going ahead and drilling in those federal lands and waters. So, you know, one of my proposals is that you either use it or you lose it.
Right.
Because if not, then you're just using it to build up the value, you know, of your balance sheets, but you're not drawing oil from it. And so I think if you're not going to use the federal land and water that's already been leased, and there are millions of acres in that regard, I think you should ultimately have to give it up.
Okay, Senator. The next question, it looks like, is from Armando. Is there anything that can be done to stop the rise in diesel gas prices so transportation costs will stop being passed on to consumers?
Well, diesel prices are a particular concern because so much of our goods require diesel to get to the marketplace, meaning the mode of transportation for so much of our goods are by vehicles, by trucks that are driven by diesel. So in recent years also, as Europe and Asia have increasingly moved to diesel cars, their economies, have grown, and the demand for diesel has significantly increased. In fact, according to the Energy Department, though, the United States, this is something that I found out, I found it pretty amazing, actually exports more gasoline, diesel, and other fuels than it imported in 2011 for the first time since, I think, 1949. So one of the things that I believe is that if you drill it on federal lands and water, that you should keep it in the United States. It's amazing to me to have millions of gallons of refined petroleum products, including gasoline and diesel, be exported from the United States. If we keep that here, we can create downward pressures on the prices of gas and diesel, and in doing so, of course, help all of our families and help our economy. So I believe drill it in the U.S., keep it in the U.S., and that's not something that's happening right now.
Right. Okay. Let's see. Oh, here's one for you about Keystone. Senator, why did you vote against the Keystone pipeline when gas prices are going through the roof?
Well, I did support a proposal for something we called expedited review of the Keystone pipeline. But that provision that I supported said, number one, you have to have the proper environmental permitting. Two, it had to be made with materials made here in the U.S. so that we're helping our workers. And three, that at the end of the day, the oil that we were going to receive was going to be kept here in the U.S. I think a lot of our viewers probably don't know that there is no guarantee under the Keystone pipeline to keep the oil that was going to be transported here in the U.S. In essence, the last thing I wanted to see it is to have a pipeline built in the country and then have that energy exported to China because you get a better price there. So it seems to me that do the expedited review, make sure you have the environmental safeguards, make sure that in fact it's made with materials made here in America. That helps American workers. And finally, make sure the energy stays here. Now, unfortunately, my Republican colleagues didn't like that view. But it seems to me those are ways in which we ensure that energy that we're going to have traverse the whole country stays in the country, and that jobs that can be created here are really American jobs at the end of the day.
Okay. All right, let's see what we have coming in here. This one, Senator, is from Elena or Lana. What do you think New Jersey's best shot at an alternative energy source is, and how soon can we realistically see results?
Well, I have led efforts if we're talking about broad energy, not sure whether we're talking about transportation energy or broad energy, I have led the efforts for solar energy in our state. And that efforts, both when I was on the Energy Committee and also on the Finance Committee developing the appropriate incentives, has made New Jersey the #1 solar installation in the country and the #2 provider of solar energy after California. That's pretty significant. So I look at that as a great alternative energy source. But if we're talking about transportation, one of the things I think that's incredibly important is that we look at natural gas as a provision, particularly for our transportation fleets, our truck fleets, our mass transit fleets. It's a cleaner burning fuel. We have an abundance here in America. It is a lot cheaper at the end of the day, and it's a good transitional fuel as we get to other forms of powered vehicles. And so, of course, the electricity market. Looking at the plug-in electric vehicles, which are increasingly being refined and giving us a lot more mileage between those periods of time which have to be plugged in. These are all ways to create the type of energy sources that can break our dependence on foreign oil and create an opportunity here in America to both create American jobs, fuel American energy, and at the same time help us beat gas prices as they are today.
Okay, great. Let's see what we have next. Okay. Now, this one we actually got several folks who emailed and wrote us for you to ask, how can we implement more energy efficiency and conservation now to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels?
Well, one of the things I hope we can do is support President Obama's, fuel efficiency standards of 54 miles per gallon by 2025 in terms of fuel economy standards. This would be incredibly important. We've already seen more and more fuel-efficient vehicles that have been developed by Detroit. And the reality is every time we challenge the industry to come up with higher fuel efficiency, they meet it. Another thing I think we can do is to support tax incentives to make homes or commercial buildings more efficient. That energy efficiency is really incredibly important, because to me, the best energy is the one that we don't even use, about what we save, which is why I authored successfully and brought into law the energy efficiency block grants that came to communities throughout the country, including New Jersey, that brought about $73 million to increasingly create energy efficiencies, from sensors to put on lights in a room when you walk in, to the new LED lighting, a lot of which we are creating in New Jersey, which is the high efficiency lighting, but a lot less energy usage. So the mix of higher fuel vehicle standards, looking at natural gas, and at the same time looking at the opportunity for incentivizing with the tax code energy efficiency buildings, homes, and looking at what we did through the energy efficiency block grant, which a lot of communities successfully changed their energy consumption, which was good for taxpayers and good for the environment as well.
Okay. This one comes in from Olivia, who asked, since the United States has oil reserves, why don't we use these temporarily until we develop extraction of what we own?
Well, it seems to me that the Strategic Petroleum Oil Reserve, if we continue to see prices rise like this, and because this economy, while it's dramatically in recovery, it still is an economy that is challenged. We still have too many families who are out of work. The last thing we need to do is to see higher gas prices create a body blow to this economy. Create, of course, to families in our state and in our country who, even though we certainly had the payroll tax cut, which put more money in their pockets, but now on the other side of it, they see some of that money that we meant for them to have for other purposes being used on gas prices. We see businesses that have to use gas to, either send their sales force or deliver their products. So, if we see it continue to rise, we may very well seek that have some of the oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve be bought out of the reserve and used in the marketplace, because obviously the greater the supply in this particular case would create downward prices.
Do you think that will happen?
It may. I mean, that's really up for the president to decide, but it seems to me that if prices keep going up, which has an economic challenge to the country, at a time that it's in recovery, it may very well be called for, and the president may choose to do so.
Okay. All right, this is from Anne. Isn't there a way to limit the profits the oil companies are allowed to make?
Well,
aren't we talking about that?
Well, legally, obviously, that would be quite difficult to do. And I'm a believer in a free market. But what I don't believe is that at a time in which the oil companies last year alone, the big five, not even all of the oil companies, just the big five, made $137 billion in profits, that they need an additional $2 billion in taxpayer loopholes and breaks and subsidies to be able to succeed economically. They don't need the money of U.S. taxpayers when they're making, $137 billion. So, what we're debating on the Senate floor as we do this town hall Twitter and we'll be voting on tomorrow is, isn't it time to end the subsidies of all of us as taxpayers for the big 5 oil companies, $24 billion over the next 10 years, a little over $2 billion a year. In that same time period, the top 5 oil companies are going to make $1 trillion with a T, $1 trillion in profits, not proceeds, profits. So I don't think when they're going to make $1 trillion over the next decade that they need $24 billion of our taxpayer money over the next decade. We want to eliminate those subsidies, use about half of it for renewable energy sources, some of which will, in essence, create new fuel sources, like we just answered to the other question before, plug-in electric, biodiesels, and whatnot, and use the other half of it to reduce the deficit and work on the debt. And so it seems to me that that's a much better proposition. And that's what I hope my colleagues will vote on tomorrow and make happen. And
just to interject here, because I know we got a lot of questions kind of that were somewhat similar to this, which is, okay, then why doesn't, if this is going to be a tough fight tomorrow, why would folks be opposed to it?
Well, I listen to some of my colleagues, and somehow they say that if the oil companies, the big 5 oil companies, don't get this $24 billion in tax breaks, that will somehow increase the price of gasoline. Well, that means that $1 trillion in profits over the same 10 years that will take those $24 billion away is not enough profit. And therefore, they'd have to go and gouge the consumer at the pump more so that they could make the full $1 trillion. So all we're saying is, you're going to make $1 trillion, take away $24 billion, that leaves you an enormous amount of money. And so I don't get it. This vote is on whose side are you on? Are you on the side of middle-class working families, or are you on the side of big oil? And I know whose side I'm on. I'm on the side of working families who are facing challenges at the pump. And we can, by using half of these proceeds in renewable energy fields, including in new fuel sources, create competition to drive down those prices and also reduce the deficit. Why should only families in our country, I look at the Republican budget proposed in the House called the Ryan budget. It cuts all types of things. It cuts disabled children, it cuts veterans, it cuts our families in so many ways. But what? Big oil stays without getting a cut. That's fundamentally wrong. So I don't quite get how they argue it, but they do.
Okay, all right. We actually got several folks who were asking about fuel economy, and Sandy wrote in, why don't we require car manufacturers to do more to improve fuel economy?
Well, I mean, President Obama is implementing his plan to require fuel economy standards of about 54 miles per gallon by 2025. We talked about that before. And moving to that amount by 2025, the industry tells us that's as quickly as they can handle that type of transition to that type of fuel economy. I think it's a great start, but again, I'll revert back to some of the other things we said. Getting our vehicles to run increasingly on electricity, natural gas, those and other alternative fuels. Those are also options because that creates competition in the marketplace and creates downward pressures.
Okay. Okay. Jason is emphatic and asks, recently I read an article that the United States is exporting more oil than it's importing. Is that true? And if so, why? Especially now.
Yeah, this is, Jason, you're right. And, I recently found this a couple of weeks ago. I was looking into the whole issue of, our gas prices, petroleum products, and I was dumbfounded to see that we are actually exporting more refined petroleum products out outside of the United States than we are importing for the first time since 1949. And I agree that it seems to me, especially, look, I can't say to the industry if they're going ahead and doing oil and gas exploration in private property, fine. If they want to extract that and ultimately send it abroad, I can't stop that. But if I'm giving you a federal license, because that license means these are the lands and waters of the people of the United States, if we are giving them a federal license to extract, oil and gas from those resources, then we can also put a condition on that license that says if you drill it in America, you keep it in America. Because I don't know how much the amount exactly is, but I know it's in like the millions of gallons of gasoline daily being exported abroad, and other refined petroleum products. Well, I'd love to see that kept here in the United States and create the downward pressure, because obviously, again, the greater supply, the downward pressure. But this is what drives me crazy. I know we have people who say, drill, baby, drill. But then are we drilling for what? To export it abroad or to keep it here in the United States? Are we going to have a Keystone pipeline that guarantees that when we finish the whole process, we keep that oil here in the United States, or are we going to be let it go to wherever the highest bidder is in the global market? So these are the considerations I think we have to have in the public policy debate going on. I want to keep, when we do federal and land and waters, those resources here in the U.S.
Okay. Okay, this one is from Justin, who actually says thank you for supporting the Nat Gas Act, and then asks, why don't we start converting all New Jersey's government vehicles to CNG? Yeah.
That's funny. I mean, it's a good question. I say it's funny because I not only support the Nat Gas Act, I'm the author of the Nat Gas Act, so I think it makes a great point. Look, I've encouraged New Jersey Transit to emulate Los Angeles County, that basically has almost all of its bus fleet running on natural gas. A lot cleaner. As a matter of fact, LA Metro is enjoying what is the equivalent of about $2 per gallon fuel. That'd be a tremendous money savings for our public entities. It'd be a much better cleaning, burning fuel in terms of our environment, certainly air quality standards, which are important to us in New Jersey. And so, Justin is right. And the other thing is that, as chair of the Senate subcommittee that deals with mass transit, the legislation that we moved in a bipartisan, unanimous fashion out of the Senate subcommittee and then through the Senate full committee basically has a clean fuels program. And obviously natural gas is part of that effort so that we can bring down prices, costs, for particularly all of us who use public transit, and at the same time save a lot of money for those agencies. So I appreciate that you like the Nat Gas Act. I'm the author.
Okay, let's see. Okay, Mark says, I almost lost it there. He says that Republicans claim drilling is the answer. But isn't U.S. oil production increasing, and why haven't gas prices gone down?
Well, exactly. As I said, oil production's at an 8-year high here in the United States. As a matter of fact, I think there are more drilling rigs in the United States than the rest of the world combined, if I'm not mistaken. And yet, prices are still sky high, as are oil company profits. And the fact of the matter is that we need to develop more alternative, affordable alternatives to oil. And that's what my bill on the floor does. At the same time that it eliminates the subsidies for big oil, it uses half of those subsidies for affordable alternative fuels, and we think that that's clearly the way to go. The fact is we have been drilling more. And the other thing is, in addition to that, we have been drilling more over the last than we have over a long period of time. That oil production is higher than it has been the last 8 years. The reality is that even with all the subsidies we've given to big oil, last year they made $137 billion in profits. Mm-hmm. Yet they actually created 4% less oil, even though they've had this record profits. I think it was up by 75%. Profits were up by 75%. They actually produced 4% less oil, and they still had the subsidies. Mm-hmm. So something is wrong with that equation for the consumers.
Okay. Marlene, and she is asking, if gas has been delivered, produced, etc., how is it that the price goes up while it waits to be sold underground?
Yeah, well, that's because oil and oil products are constantly fluctuating in price based on a global market, and oil and its refined products are being traded on electronic markets that can have wild swings and in turn cause us pain at the pump. I think we can better regulate these markets. That was part of one of the previous questions with the CFTC, the federal agency, that we gave powers to regulate the market with a commodity futures trading entity, and we want to see them use those powers now, robustly. But that's in essence why we see that even though you may have gas in the ground, the fluctuations take place in pricing.
Okay, you're running through these. Okay. Mark, it says, why are we still oil dependent in the first place? When are we going to stop the insanity?
Well, Mark, you're right. This is why I have been a big advocate of going through the whole process of a renewable energy portfolio that breaks our addiction to foreign oil at a time in which we send billions of dollars abroad to countries that are despotic, wish us ill, and at the end of the day we fuel their despotism by our addiction to foreign oil, instead of creating a new generation of high-paying jobs here in the United States, jobs that can create American energy, fuel American prosperity, promote American innovation abroad. That's why I've worked so hard on the fuel efficiency effort. That's why I work so hard on solar energy. That's why we're working on wind energy, which we think is another opportunity, on biofuels that are not going to raise food prices but use it from food waste. There's a whole universe of things that we can do, and that will break our addiction to foreign oil. Energy conservation, very important as part of that. As I've always said earlier, the best energy is the one that we don't use at the end of the day. And then continuously moving people, to mass transit and livable communities. All of that breaks our addiction to foreign oil and stops this enormous transfer of American wealth to countries that don't share our values.
Okay. At Live Light had tweeted, will you help end subsidizing for oil companies and help put that money towards green tech, which
well, I think we've talked about that a little bit. Well, green technologies. Not only will I do that, but certainly that's the fight that we're having right now. If my Repeal Big Oil Tax Subsidies Act passes, we would cut those oil subsidies for the big five. Again, the ones that are making $137 billion in profits last year will make $1 trillion over the next decade, and we'll use it for a whole host of renewable energy tax credits that are certainly green tech at the end of the day, and both for different fuel sources for our transportation needs, but also for other energy needs in this country.
I feel like we have talked about this just a little bit, but Steve, we can answer Steve's question about how does your Repealing Tax Subsidies Act protect the individual consumer? And I feel like we've asked this, but if there is from even higher gas prices. So I guess that's a little bit different about higher versus whether or not it will cut them.
Yeah. Well, number one, it stops you from paying at the pump once and then paying twice by giving big oil subsidies. That's number one. As I said, I don't think they need $24 billion as they're, as we are getting gouged at the pump. Number two is this would be an opportunity for us to use that money in alternative fuels that will provide competition in the marketplace, ensuring that at the end of the day we have all of these different fuel sources. Those, I think, by having that whole broader universe of fuel sources, instead of just depending upon gasoline, we drive prices downward. But the last thing we need to do is to pay at the pump and then to give big oil another $24 billion.
Okay. Well, Senator, believe it or not, we just used a half an hour of your time answering questions for your first Twitter town hall. How did you feel?
Well, it's great. I mean, I appreciate the questions. I appreciate the thought that people put into it. Thank you, Tricia, for getting us through the process. I'm sorry I didn't get the opportunity to answer every question. And I don't want to end this important conversation here, so I'm going to try and answer as many more questions as I can right on my Twitter feed. So please keep an eye out for those, and thanks again for everyone who participated. I really enjoyed this first Twitter Town Hall. It's great that we can use technology to communicate and to connect while we're here working for you in Washington in ways I guess at one point I'd never imagined. So I'm looking forward to more opportunities like today, and thank you all for joining us.